So my memories of computer magazines, and that is where you got your news. Right, so again, a link to pre-internet, where you're going to find out about stuff. It's in a magazine. And yes, I remember for me, because I was a Commodore 64 boy, which I hear very popular computer in this part of the world. So I used to read a magazine called Zap 64. But before that, which I think is more interesting, there used to be a magazine called Popular Computer Weekly. And as the name suggests, it came out every week. And it was just this big. But the most interesting thing is on the front, it was like a newspaper. So it had stories on. But also it had programs you could type in, which again, that idea that you could create something free. Can I stress this much? Is that the fact that you could play games for free. I do remember vividly typing in, on my friends, couldn't afford one, a ZX81, typing in a program, which, if anyone ever used a ZX81 keyboard, it should come with a health and safety warning, because you'd look like this. And we did that for several hours. And then it ran. First of all, it ran, okay, just impressive. And just one asterisk moved down the screen like this. And then you can move and just an alarm go like that. And I'm telling you, it's like we made that. Now I know someone else made that, but it's like we did. And then you have this wonderful bit after we've done that a few times of going, what if we change something? Right? And so you just have that idea of, and that, we'll talk about this in a bit, but is that was happening at the same time that arcade cabinets were becoming big. And before we go any further, right, and we're going to fall out about this, lads, right, it's arcade cabinets, it is never arcades, right? Arcades would imply the plural of the places you went to see the machine. Anyone who calls it vinyls is also wrong, okay? So we just got that clear, right? Arcade cabinets, right? You got me?
Yep. And
we may continue, okay? Is that just you have this time that these arcade machines were arriving everywhere, and they just arrived fully formed, like they were delivered from the gods, right? And you would know the concept that a human being had made that. A human being had made some decisions. God, well, we should put a base there and not there, or oh look, when we shoot these invaders, they go faster. That's wrong, or maybe that's right. We'll leave that, and that's why all of that was just beyond us. They just arrived, you know. Whereas suddenly now you have this insight into, oh no, people have said these, you know, 10 print, Paul is A's, 20 go to 10. People had put in commands. And suddenly I think that's what opened up.
I think in the magazines having those kind of games listings are really important, but also for us cover discs, kind of pre-internet, getting all the software on there, they were essential for the games companies to sell titles as well, kind of get those demos out there. In the UK it was really popular. There's a magazine called Amiga Format, which was huge, probably huge over here, and we had one called FHM as well, which was a kind of
lads mag.
Are you counting that?
I think the peak time was when Amiga Format actually sold out FHM for 1 month.
Sold more copies.
Yeah,
right.
And that was really impressive to see a computer title magazine kind of getting to that level in culture.
How did you start writing about video games then, Paul?
I shall tell you exactly. The first thing I ever wrote for was a fanzine. Do I need to explain what that is? It's a piece of paper folded up. So, you know, it's like a small homemade magazine. And there was one called Retro Classics with an X at the end. Can I just say it was a different time? Okay, right? It was acceptable in the noughties to start classics with an X at the end. Okay. And I bought it at a game show. And I just thought, and I could see the writing was, well, let's just say, accessible, but also doable. You know, again, a bit like I said, the arcade machines were untouchable, but typing in a game, that was tangible. Writing for a published magazine, not to. Writing for a fanzine that someone's produced in their shed or back bedroom, that seemed doable. So I wrote to the man, and when I say wrote, it wasn't. We did have email then. It was an email, right? And the guy came out and he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'll print whatever you want." Right? Of course he did. Right? I wasn't asking for any money. And so I got in touch with Scott Adams. So the one I mentioned earlier. I thought, well, I'll just try because again, I can't stress enough that, you know, the internet. I know it's been going since 1989. I know there's ARPANET in the 70s. I know. But it wasn't really until the mid 90s like the university, well, back then the college that I worked at, you could get on the internet, right? Again, it seemed magical. And I found he had a website, and I found his address, so I wrote to him. Hello, my name's Paul. I used to play your games, which again I thought was a great way to open. Apparently, I think he got those emails every other day. Hello, your games were a big influence on me. But he wrote back, and I said, can I ask you some questions for a fanzine? He wrote back, okay? And I couldn't believe it, and so I sent it off to this fanzine, who obviously printed it. It's free, it's a fanzine. And that was the first thing I ever got in print, which was an interview with Scott Adams. And in one sense, that's well, I eventually met him. It got to be 18 years later, and I got a bit emotional. I don't look like an emotional man, do I? But I got quite emotional, I must say.
Mm. How did you turn that into a career then? Because obviously we mentioned Retro Gamer magazine. I mean, I've saw a few copies over there, really popular here, and Edge magazine as well.
Right, so the first thing I'd like to say is that I have got a proper job, okay, right? Is that I've always worked with kids with learning difficulties. I was a teacher in a special school, and I ran residential homes for disabled people. And then I did that for 16 years, and then I got a job at Nottingham Trent University, and I'm a senior lecturer. I always feel a bit funny when I say that. I'm a senior lecturer in special educational needs and inclusion. So I have got a proper job. Writing about games has always been a lovely sideline. And can I say, any of you out there who fans, often people over the years have said, how can I get in to writing about games? And I say, I've got good news and I've got bad news, okay? The good news is at the moment, even more than back then, the bar to write about something you care about and see it published has never been lower. The chance of you making a living out of it has probably similarly never been lower. I'd argue it's not completely different than if you're in a band, or you're making music, is that you can get your music out to an audience that you never could 20, 40 years ago, where you'd have to perform some sexual services with some record companies, right? Okay, we miss those days. So now you can get your music out. The chances of you making a living off that are smaller.
I think it's really interesting that you've done Retro Gamer and Edge, because Future Publishing used to be a massive publishing house, and those are like the two big gaming mags left.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we are the last one standing. Yeah, I would like to say that whilst I just said that, and I want to be encouraging. If anyone's interested in getting into writing about games, please talk to me. I want to help. I always hate it when creative, just because their job's supposed to be cool, they're not helpful to other people. Right? Is that, if anyone asks me about working with kids with special needs, I'm like, yeah, come on, I'll tell you how it is, the kind of qualifications the amount of people who want to get into creative industries. I mean, when I was trying to start writing, I started writing for my local paper, the Nottingham Post, right? They've not got a games column. So I wrote to them and I said, hello, I've written a few things for a fanzine, right? You haven't got a games column. Games are very popular now, would you? Nothing. Then you write the second one, hello, I don't know if you received my email. Nothing, okay, right? And then by the fourth one, right, I just went to their office and stood outside until the editor came in. I went, hello, I don't think you've been getting my emails. And he gave me a chance. Now, what's interesting, as soon as I got something in print, so that a year later, when 2 years later, when Retro Gamer started, is that I sent something in print. And my editor now is a good mate of mine, Martin Cowell, who's the launch editor. He said it was the fact that you sent something in print, because it sort of was a throwback to that retro idea of magazines, And he said that's what, and that I think that's got me in, okay. And then then Retro Gamer, like you say, in the opening issue, Martin wrote, he said, people say that retro games are niche, but I think there's enough retro to write for 100 issues. And he said, I thought I was just being stupid. He said, our publisher said, we'll publish one, right? So if you look at the first issue, there's nothing like what's coming next month. And a lot of the features sort of 100 greatest games, the kind of thing that it's a standalone. And when it sold really well, and they said, oh yeah, it can go monthly, he was like, shit. And then he's like, and then he said, that's when I got your letter. And he said, great, yeah, I need writers. I can't. He did all that first issue on his own. And if you say, but there's lots of different writers' names in that first issue, almost all the bottom two are made up. They were just him pretending they got it. So that's what you do back then when you're trying to get something off the ground.